In the 5th year of my marriage with Caspian Hayes, I finally received the wonderful news of being able to leave this world once and for all. In my last 3 days of existence, I decided to play the roles of the perfect wife and the silent mother Caspian and our son, Noah Hayes, want me to play. On the first day, Caspian complains that I'm not prim and proper enough, so he intends to attend the banquet with a fake heiress, Erin Winslow, as his date. I merely iron his suit without a word of complaint. On the second day, Noah doesn't like how nagging I am, so he throws a tantrum and demands to see Erin. With a smile on my face, I deliver him to Erin's doorstep. On the third day, my friend calls me on the phone. She asks me in a disappointed tone, "Aren't you worried that you might lose favor with them for real at this point?" I just smile wanly. "It's fine. I'll be going home soon anyway." That's when Caspian wheels around to look at me. For once, there's panic in his eyes. "Aren't you an orphan, Astrid? You don't have another home other than the one you have with me." Seeing the shock in Caspian Hayes' eyes, I hung up and calmly said, "I was just joking. Even if I do have a family to go home to, they won't welcome me." Only then did Caspian finally relax. "I'm celebrating Erin's birthday tonight, and Noah is coming too. Do you want me to come along?" I asked and smiled. Caspian looked surprised. In the past, I would have thrown a massive fit if he ever said anything like that, crying and screaming to stop him and Noah Hayes from meeting Erin Winslow. But now, there wasn't a trace of resentment on my face. I even proactively offered to join them. Even so, he coldly turned me down. "You don't have to come along. Her parents raised you for years, but now that she's finally reunited with them, this is the first birthday party her biological parents are throwing for her. Your presence will only make things awkward for everyone." Every word he said made it clear that I didn't belong, and I just stood there listening in silence. I had a foster family I could never blend into, a biological family I could never return to, and my in-laws had no place for me. I was the perfect embodiment of the word orphan Caspian always threw around. I indifferently nodded.
Fine.
"I won't go then, but do me a favor and deliver Erin her gift." While Caspian looked me up and down in utter disbelief, I ignored his stare and pulled out a box from the cabinet before handing it to him. It contained a pair of sparkling earrings. He barely glanced at it before disdainfully saying, "This gift is way too basic for Erin." I stood rooted to the spot and watched as he carelessly tossed the box onto the desk. He had no idea that this so-called basic item was the finest gift I had to offer. Erin and I were never close, but since it was her birthday, I didn't want to give anyone an excuse to start drama. So that day, I rummaged through the cabinets and turned the house upside down before I finally managed to find that pair of exquisite, expensive earrings. I hadn't even been able to bring myself to wear the earrings, yet Caspian tossed them aside with disgust. Deep down, I knew that he didn't think the earrings were basic. He simply looked down on any gift that came from me, a mere housewife. Frowning, he looked up at me and asked, "I bought Erin a necklace as a gift a few days ago. Where did you put it while you were cleaning?" I had seen the necklace he was talking about a few days prior. It was the most thoughtful gift I had ever seen him buy in our 5 years of marriage. Back then, I thought he had noticed my odd behavior. Maybe he was trying to surprise me on my birthday and make peace. So, I tucked it away on his bookshelf and pretended to have never seen it. As it turned out, I wasn't the rightful owner of the gift at all. I went into the study, retrieved the necklace, and handed it to Caspian. The tight frown on his brow relaxed slightly as he took the velvet box. "Noah and I will be back as soon as possible. If there's anything you want to eat, just order it yourself using my card." I smiled and quietly said okay as I watched them leave. After the heavy front door shut with a loud thud, I turned around to return to my room as the maid's mocking taunts drifted over from behind me. "She's such a failure as Mrs. Hayes. Not only can't she keep her husband's heart, but she also can't keep her son's. She has the same birthday as Ms. Winslow, but both of them ran off to celebrate Ms. Winslow's, and not a single person remembers her birthday. At this rate, it won't be long before she has to hand over her place as Mrs. Hayes to Ms. Winslow." Another maid sighed in sympathy. "Mrs. Hayes really does have it rough. Her biological parents are dead, and her foster parents never loved her either. Ms. Winslow is the lucky one. She spent the first 20 years of her life growing up pampered and spoiled by the Winslows, and now, her biological parents' business has taken off, so she gets to live in luxury all over again." Every word reached my ears clearly, but I never looked back. It wasn't the first time I had heard such talk. At first, I would have angrily snapped at them. I used to dislike Erin, but back then, I still believed Caspian truly cared for me. But later, all it took was one comment from Erin that she liked my bracelet, and Caspian took the gift he had given me and handed it to her at her birthday party. Slowly, My heart had grown completely numb, but I knew that it was fine. 3 days would fly by. Tonight, I was finally going home. I returned to my bedroom, took our wedding portrait down from the wall, and ran my fingertips over the wedding dress. On our wedding night, the system had announced my successful completion of the mission and presented me with an invitation to leave this world. Over the years spent trying to win Caspian over, I had said a lot of romantic words. But somewhere along the way, those words became laced with genuine affection. I had agonized over the decision all night. Half drunk in the middle of the night, I finally gathered the courage to tell him. The truth is, I'm just a passing traveler in your life. Someday, you'll meet your true female lead, who's elegant, graceful, and understanding, someone who's far better than me. Caspian's eyes had immediately reddened. He shoved me against the wall, knocking empty beer cans all over the floor. Then, he bit my lips hard and announced in a hoarse and possessive voice, I don't want someone elegant or understanding. You're the only female lead in my life, and I love you for who you really are. I love being controlled by you. His kiss had left me utterly dizzy and breathless. That night, I was so overwhelmed with happiness that I ignored the system's repeated prompts. I forgot just how easily human hearts could change. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Erin entered his life just as expected, and little by little, his heart began to lean toward her. He started complaining that I wasn't refined enough and that I couldn't handle social events with grace. He said I controlled him too much and never gave him enough freedom. He began to resent all my flaws and picked apart everything that wasn't perfect about me. In the end, I was the only one who still remembered the promises made on our wedding night. There was a sudden, loud pounding on the door. The shock made me flinch, and the wedding portrait slipped from my hands, shattering into pieces on the floor. The pounding didn't stop. I quickly stepped over the glass shards and opened the door. Caspian immediately grabbed me by the arm and began dragging me out. His grip was painfully tight. I instinctively frowned and asked, "Where are we going?" The rain began as a slow, rhythmic tapping against the windshield, casting long, fractured shadows across the leather interior of Caspian's car. "Get in," Caspian ordered, his voice tight with a mixture of anger and an anxiety he couldn't quite name. Astrid didn't struggle. She didn't demand to know where they were going, nor did she accuse him of prioritizing Erin on her own birthday. She simply climbed into the passenger seat, pulled the seatbelt across her chest, and clicked it into place. The silence in the car was suffocating. For the past 5 years, every car ride had been filled with Astrid's voice, asking about his day, reminding him to eat, or gently scolding him for driving too fast. Now, she sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring out at the blurred neon lights of the city. "Erin's necklace is gone," Caspian said, his knuckles turning white against the steering wheel as he accelerated. "The one I bought her. Noah said he saw you holding it in the study earlier. And now, it's missing from Erin's dressing room at the Winslow estate. Her mother is furious. Astrid. They are ready to call the police." "I didn't take it," Astrid said simply. Her voice was level, devoid of any defensive edge. It was the tone of someone stating a mundane fact, like the color of the sky. "Then why did Noah see you with it?" Caspian snapped, his voice cracking slightly. He hated this quietness. It felt like trying to grasp water. The harder he squeezed, the more she slipped through his fingers. "He's your son, Astrid. Why would he lie about something like that?" "He didn't lie," Astrid replied, her gaze remaining fixed on the rain-streaked window. "I was holding it because you asked me where it was. I retrieved it from the study and handed it to you. What happened to it after it left this house has nothing to do with me." Caspian opened his mouth to argue, but the cold logic of her words stopped him. Yes, she had handed it to him. He remembered the velvet box in his hands. But the panic of the Winslow family's accusations, coupled with Noah's insistence that his mother had looked angry and jealous while holding the jewelry, had clouded his judgment. "Just apologize to Erin when we get there," Caspian said, his voice dropping to a low, pleading murmur. "Even if it's a misunderstanding, her parents are influential, and Noah is terrified. If you apologize, we can make this go away. I'll buy you a much better necklace tomorrow. Anything you want. Just don't look at me like this." Astrid finally turned her head to look at him. There was no sadness in her eyes, only a profound, empty calm. "Okay," she said. Caspian's heart skipped a beat. "Okay? You'll apologize?" "Yes," Astrid said, turning back to the window. "I'll apologize." Her easy compliance didn't bring him the relief he expected. Instead, a cold, Dread began to pool in the pit of his stomach. In the past, Astrid would have fought him tooth and nail. She would have wept, demanded he trust her, and accused him of throwing her to the wolves to protect Erin. Her fiery temper was something he had grown to resent, yet facing this absolute void of emotion was infinitely more terrifying. The Winslow estate was a spectacle of wealth and privilege. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the high society guests who mingled with champagne, flutes in hand. But inside the private holding room upstairs, the atmosphere was frozen. Erin sat on a velvet chaise longue, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Noah stood close to her, his small hand holding onto her skirt. Mom, Noah gasped as the door opened. He looked at Astrid, his young face a mask of guilt and defiance. You shouldn't have taken Annie Erin's necklace.
She was so sad.
Just give it back, and we won't be mad at you anymore. Astrid looked at her 7-year-old son. She remembered the day he was born, how she had held his tiny, fragile body and promised to protect him from every
storm.
She had spent years catering to his every whim, enduring his tantrums, and trying to be the perfect mother. Now he was standing beside another woman, accusing his own mother of theft. Without a second thought, Astrid, Mrs. Winslow stepped forward, her face hardened with aristocratic
disdain.
We tolerated you for years because our daughter was missing, but to think you would harbor such malice. To steal her birthday gift out of petty jealousy? Have you no shame? Mom, please, Erin sobbed softly, resting her hand on Noah's shoulder.
I'm
sure Astrid didn't mean to. She's lived in luxury for so long. Maybe she was worried Caspian would leave her. I don't want to make a scene.
I
just want my necklace back. Caspian looked at Astrid, silently urging her to speak, to offer the apology they had agreed upon. Astrid walked to the center of the room. She stood before the Winslows, before her husband, and before her son. She did not look like a thief caught in the act. She stood with a quiet, regal grace that made the opulent room look cheap. I do not have the necklace, Astrid said, her voice clear and carrying to every corner of the room. But since my presence here is causing distress, and since you all believe I am responsible, I will apologize. She turned to Erin and bowed her head slightly. I am sorry, Erin. Happy birthday. No tears. No trembling. No desperate pleas for Caspian to believe her. Erin's sobbing stopped abruptly. She stared at Astrid, completely unnerved by the lack of reaction. She had expected Astrid to scream, to throw a tantrum, to prove to Caspian once and for all how unstable and unrefined she was. But this dignified apology made Erin look petty and dramatic in comparison. Astrid. Caspian took a step toward her, his hand reaching out instinctively. That's not. Before he could finish, the door to the holding room burst open. A frantic hotel manager stood there, holding a velvet box. Mr. Hayes. Mrs. Winslow, the manager panted, bowing apologetically. We found
it.
The necklace was found in the inner pocket of the garment bag Ms. Winslow used to transport her change of clothes. It seems it was never placed in the jewelry box to begin with. The silence that followed was absolute. Mrs. Winslow's face flushed a deep crimson. Erin froze, her mouth slightly open, while Noah looked back and forth between Erin and his mother in confusion. Oh, Erin stammered, her voice suddenly high and nervous. I must have forgotten. I was in such a rush to change. Caspian felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under him.
He slowly
turned his head to look at Astrid. She was looking at the grandfather clock in the corner of the room. 8:15 p.m. She had less than 4 hours left. Astrid. Caspian's voice was barely a whisper. He stepped toward her, his hand trembling as he reached for her arm. I'm sorry. I should have. Astrid stepped back, smoothly evading his touch. She didn't look angry, she looked like a stranger who had politely declined a flyer on the street. It's fine, she said. Since the misunderstanding is cleared up, I'll be going home now. Mom. Noah ran forward, suddenly terrified by the empty look in his mother's
eyes.
He reached out to grab her coat. Mom, I'm sorry. I thought I saw you. Astrid did not kneel to his level. She did not hug him or brush away his tears. She gently pried his small fingers off her coat, her touch light but unyielding. It's okay, Noah, she said softly. Go play with Annie Erin. It's her birthday.
No.
Mom, I want to go home with you. Noah cried, his voice echoing in the quiet room. I want to eat your egg noodles. I don't want to stay here. The maids will make them for you, Astrid replied. She turned to Caspian, her expression completely placid. You should stay and finish the banquet. Don't let me ruin Erin's night. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out of the room. Her footsteps were light, steady, and entirely devoid of hesitation. Astrid.
Wait.
Caspian ignored the calling voices of the Winslows and Erin.
He
Ran after her, his heart hammering against his ribs in a wild, erratic panic. He caught up to her in the grand lobby, grabbing her wrist. Astrid, stop.
I'll
Take you home. I'm leaving the banquet. We're going home together. Astrid stopped and looked at his hand on her wrist. Caspian followed her gaze and slowly let go, feeling a chill run down his spine. You don't have to, she said. I want to, Caspian insisted, his voice rising in desperation. I made a mistake, Astrid. I was stupid. I listened to Noah, I listened to the Winslows. I was wrong. Please, let me take you home. Astrid stared at him for a long moment, as if evaluating a puzzle she had already solved. All right, she said. If you wish. The drive back to the villa was silent. Caspian tried to initiate conversation. Multiple times, his voice shaking as he spoke of useless, trivial things, the weather, a new project at work, a vacation they could take. We can go to Switzerland, he said, his eyes scanning her face in the rearview mirror. You always wanted to see the snow there.
We can go next week. Just the
two of us. No work, no Noah, no one else. Astrid did not answer. She kept her head tilted against the glass, watching the rain wash away the reflections of the city lights. She wasn't ignoring him. She was already gone. When they arrived at the villa, the storm had worsened. Thunder rumbled in the distance, shaking the glass panes of the grand house. Astrid walked straight upstairs to their bedroom. Caspian followed her, standing in the doorway as she began to open the closet. He expected her to pack a suitcase, to pack her clothes and leave him.
He was
prepared to beg, to lock the doors, to do whatever it took to keep her from walking out. But Astrid didn't pull out a suitcase. She retrieved a large, empty metal wastebasket from the study and placed it in the center of the bedroom. Then, she began pulling items from the drawers. An old, knitted scarf she had spent 3 weeks making for him during their first winter together. The one he had complained was too scratchy and had left in the closet ever since. A collection of hand-drawn cards Noah had made for her when he was younger, before he learned to call her nagging and embarrassing. A small, dried rose from their first anniversary. One by one, she tossed them into the metal bin. Astrid, what are you doing? Caspian asked, his voice trembling as he stepped into the room. Astrid didn't answer. She walked over to the shattered remains of their wedding portrait, which still lay on the floor from earlier. She carefully picked up the canvas print, ignoring the sharp glass, and tore it in half. She dropped the pieces into the bin. Astrid, stop. Caspian lunged forward, grabbing her hands. Why are you doing
this?
If you're angry, scream at me, hit me, tell me I'm a bastard. But don't do this. Astrid looked down at his hands gripping hers. His palms were warm, but she felt nothing. The system's countdown was humming softly in the back of her mind. 10:45 p.m. I'm not angry, Caspian, she said, her voice gentle, almost pitying. I'm just cleaning up. When a guest leaves, they should take their trash with them.
I
don't want to leave a mess behind. Guest? Caspian's breath hitched. You're not a guest. This is your home. You're my wife. I was, Astrid said. But my time is up. She pulled her hands free and struck a match. The small flame flickered in the drafty room before she dropped it into the metal bin. The dry paper and old yarn caught instantly. Bright orange flames licked the edges of their wedding portrait, turning their smiling, younger faces into black
ash.
Caspian stared at the fire, horror gripping his chest. He tried to reach into the bin to smother the flames, but the heat pushed him back. He burned his fingers, but the pain was nothing compared to the suffocating terror clawing at his throat. Why are you doing this? He whispered, tears finally streaming down his face. Astrid, please. I love you. I know I've been terrible. I know I compared you to Erin, and I'm so sorry. I was blind. I was trying to find flaws in you because I thought you would always be here. I took you for granted. Please, don't punish me like this. Astrid stood by the window, the firelight casting long, dancing shadows across her pale face. 5 years ago, she said softly, on our wedding night, You told me I was the only female lead in your life. You said you loved me for who I was. Caspian nodded frantically, stepping closer to her. I did. I do. But you didn't, she replied, her voice filled with a quiet, devastating
certainty.
You wanted a perfect, quiet, elegant doll. You wanted someone who wouldn't complain when you ignored her, someone who would graciously welcome the woman you truly desired into our home. I tried to be that for you these last 3 days. Do you like this version of me, Caspian? Caspian froze. The silent, agreeable Astrid of the last 3 days. The one who ironed his suits without a word, who delivered his son to another woman's door, who apologized for a crime she didn't commit. It wasn't a wife. It was a ghost. No, Caspian choked out, his chest heaving as he sobbed. No, I hate it. I want you back. I want the Astrid who yells at me, who throws things, who tells me to go to hell. Please, Astrid, bring her back. She's dead, Astrid said simply. You killed her, Caspian. Little by little, every time you looked at her with disappointment, every time you chose Erin, every time you let Noah hurt her. She's gone. 11:50 p.m. The fire in the metal bin had died down to a pile of glowing gray ashes. The scent of burnt paper and wool hung heavy in the air. Noah had returned home, brought back by the driver. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom, clutching his favorite plush toy, his eyes wide with fear as he saw his father weeping on his knees.
Dad.
Noah whimpered.
Mom?
What's happening? Astrid turned to look at the boy. For the first time in days, a faint, genuine smile appeared on her lips. It was a smile of release. Noah, she called out softly. Noah ran into the room, throwing himself toward her.
Mom.
I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I'll be good, I promise. Don't be mad at me. But as he tried to wrap his arms around her waist, his body passed straight through her. Noah gasped, stumbling forward and falling onto the carpet. He turned around, his eyes wide with terror. Mom? Why couldn't I hug you? Caspian's head snapped up. He lunged forward, trying to grab Astrid's shoulders. But his hands slipped through her skin as if she were made of mist and light. Astrid? Caspian screamed, his voice cracking into a raw, desperate shriek. What is this? What are you doing to yourself? A soft, ethereal white light began to emanate from Astrid's body.
It was a
gentle, warm glow, contrasting sharply with the cold, dark storm outside. Her physical form was becoming translucent, the patterns of the wallpaper visible through her silhouette. Host, departure sequence initiated. 3 minutes remaining. The mechanical voice of the system echoed only in Astrid's mind, but the physical manifestation of her departure was plain for them to see. No, no, no. Caspian scrambled on his knees, trying to gather the light into his arms, but his hands only met empty air. He was sobbing hysterically, his face pale with a terror so absolute it paralyzed him. Astrid, please.
Stop this.
What kind of magic is this? Tell me how to stop it. I'll give you my life, I'll give you anything. Just don't leave me. I told you, Caspian, Astrid said, her voice sounding distant, as if echoing from the end of a long tunnel. I have a home to go to. I chose to stay here 5 years ago because I believed in your promise. But a promise is only as strong as the heart that keeps it. Yours broke a long time ago.
Mom.
Noah was crying, hitting the floor in frustration as he tried to grasp her fading feet. Don't go. I want my mom. I hate Auntie Erin.
I want
you. Astrid looked down at the weeping child.
Goodbye, Noah.
Grow up well.
Don't.
Learn to value things only after you've lost them. She turned her gaze to Caspian, whose eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a despair so deep it seemed to consume his entire being. Goodbye, Caspian. Thank you for the 5 years of joy, and thank you for the lessons of the last 3 days. I don't hate you. I don't even regret loving
you.
But I am finally going home. 10, 9,
8.
Astrid. Caspian screamed, throwing himself forward, trying to cover her fading body with his own, hoping his weight, his flesh, his blood could bind her to this earth. 3, 2, 1. Departure successful. Returning to the original world. With a soft, melodic SHH, the white light flared briefly, illuminating the entire bedroom before collapsing inward. The light vanished. The room plunged back into the dim, shadow-filled reality of the storm. Caspian fell heavily onto the carpet, his arms wrapping around nothing but empty
Air.
The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain outside and Noah's quiet, terrified whimpering. She was gone. The search began that very night. Caspian used every resource at his disposal. He hired the country's top private investigators, contacted government agencies, and spent millions of dollars tracing every flight, train, and bus route. He put pressure on the police, demanding they search every square inch of the city. But there was no trace of Astrid. It wasn't just that she had disappeared. It was as if she were being actively erased from the fabric of reality. 3 weeks after her departure, Caspian opened his phone to look at her contact card, only to find the name, Astrid, gone. The call history was blank. Panic-stricken, he rushed to the safe in his study to check her passport and ID. The drawers were empty. He logged into his bank portal to check the accounts. Any record of her name on the joint accounts had vanished, replaced by a single, sterile message. No secondary holder found. Even her medical records at the hospital, her school records, and her birth certificate, everything that proved Astrid had walked this earth, slowly dissolved into nothingness. To the rest of the world, Caspian Hayes had always been a bachelor who had somehow ended up with a son. Mr. Hayes, his assistant said one day, looking at him with deep concern.
Are
You sure you had a wife? We've checked every database. There is no record of anyone named Astrid Winslow or Astrid Hayes ever existing in this country. Caspian grabbed his assistant by the collar, his eyes wild and bloodshot.
She
Existed. She lived in my house. She gave birth to my son. Are you calling me crazy? The assistant looked at him with pity. Sir, perhaps you should rest. Even the Winslows seemed to have forgotten her. When Caspian confronted them, Mrs. Winslow looked at him in confusion. A foster daughter? Caspian, what are you talking about? We only ever had Erin. We never adopted anyone else. The system had cleaned up after itself. It had removed all traces of the foreign entity to protect the integrity of the world. Only Caspian and Noah remembered, because they were the ones who had bound her to this world. They were cursed to carry the memory of her existence like a branding iron on their souls. A year passed. The Hayes villa, once a bustling home, had become a mausoleum. Noah sat at the dining table, staring at a plate of egg noodles prepared by the five-star chef Caspian had hired. He took a single bite, burst into tears, and pushed the plate away. It's not right, the 8-year-old sobbed, his face pale and thin. It doesn't taste like Mom's. Noah, please eat something, Caspian whispered. He looked no better than his
son.
His hair was streaked with gray, his frame hollowed out, his eyes sunken and devoid of life. He had completely abandoned the company, leaving his deputies to run it. He spent his days sitting in the empty master bedroom, staring at the floor where the metal bin had once stood. Erin Winslow had tried to visit them several times over the year. She had worn her finest dresses, brought expensive gifts for Noah, and tried to assume the role of the comforting, elegant woman Caspian had once claimed to want. But her presence only brought violence. The last time she had entered the house, Noah had screamed at the top of his lungs, throwing a glass vase at her head. Get out. You're not my mom. It's your fault she's gone. I hate you. Caspian had not scolded his son. He had simply looked at Erin with eyes so cold, so dead, that she had fled the house in terror and never returned. Tonight, the rain tapped against the window, a bitter echo of the night she left. Caspian walked to the window, placing his hand against the cold glass. He looked down at his palms, which still burned with the memory of the fire, the memory of her light slipping through his fingers. Astrid, he whispered into the empty, silent room. I kept my promise. I didn't let anyone else enter this house. I didn't let anyone take your place. But the house remained silent. There was no nagging voice to scold him for standing in the draft. There was no warm hand to slip into his. There was only the sound of the rain, washing away the ashes of a love he had realized too late, leaving him to spend the rest of his life in a home that was no longer a home, haunted by the ghost of a perfect wife who had finally, happily, gone back to where she belonged.